But I'm going to go ahead and get us started tonight, and looking forward to spending some time. We're actually going to, this is going to be a completely different evening. And in fact, I'm going to take you into a place that is not my comfort zone. Um, my, and the area I'm going to talk about is that is not in my comfort zone is art, visual art. I don't know a whole lot about visual art, um, but I think I'd like for us to talk about it and talk about a few pieces. I will say that poetry through the ages. Our class has been really looking at some of the poetic masters, some of the poems that are assigned in college classrooms and even some high school classrooms throughout the ages. And I know there's some visual art that does the same thing, and I would like us just to observe, enjoy, and if I may, speak back to particular works of art. Again, our assignment is to observe, enjoy, and speak back to different pieces of visual art. And so Lisa Renee and Mike, I welcome you to participate with the chat, and I'll keep my eye on that. But the first piece of art I want to take us a look at is Pieta, from Michelangelo. Um, uh, that is actually this is a piece of art in the Sistine Chapel from Michelangelo. He very often considered one of the first great masters, certainly one of the great masters that exists today. And again, this art is not my field, but knowing that what we want to do is observe, appreciate, and comment on and talk back to the art. What would you have to say? What do you observe? What do you appreciate? And if you had to speak back to this piece of art, what would you say to it?
I've always this is James. I've always enjoyed this piece, but it's always been so curious that Earth is so lonely. There's only one person, and the heavens are so crowded. And it's not the way I picture heaven at all.
Mm.
And the other thing that I've always noticed, and I think it was brought out in a Dan Brown novel too, is that the heaven side of this is superimposed on what looks to be a brain, a human brain outline,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
suggesting if we followed that heaven and all of the supernatural stuff is perhaps a figment of the brain.
Yep.
Um, and so anyway, I that's what I observed and thought about this painting as I've seen it over the years.
Great. And James, in just a minute, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a minute to think about this. In a minute, I'm going to ask you if you could say something to this piece of artwork, what would you say? So think about that. Jenna, I think you were about to make a comment. What are you observing and appreciating? And feel free to unmute.
There.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I lost my internet. It comes and goes. But um, while James was saying that looked like a brain, I thought it looked like a conch shell.
Uh-huh,
I
uh-huh.
thought it was some kind of a shell, but it probably is a brain. My thoughts were in art and poetry. It's something that you have to create. It's something you have to make up. It doesn't happen on its own.
I love it. I think you just said art and poetry don't create themselves. It takes an artist, a poet, to produce them. They are productive arts. Really powerful. Mike, I don't think we hear you still. So feel free to answer that question. And Lisa Renee, I don't know if Lisa Renee may have popped off there. But go ahead and chat in the chat uh, any observations that you might have of this. And James, let's go back to you. And my question to you was, if you had to say something back to this piece of art, what would you say?
I would say who's making who. You have the
That was awesome. Who's making who? That was awesome.
I mean the figure that we think of as God in this picture is the only figure that's clothed. What the heck?
Yeah, yeah.
And it could very easily be this human daydreaming and partly bored and kind of half-heartedly thinking about where he came from and creating that versus God and everybody or whoever the creator or whatever that's going on the other side here.
Yeah.
Look at all the action and emotion and that's where all the interesting stuff. And we I want to know who's making who in this picture.
Yeah, nice. Great. Jenna, I know it's a weird question. The question is, if you had to say something back to this piece, what would you say?
Well, I wished I could do some research behind this
Yeah.
art to see who that person. I didn't know that was God. Who? I don't know much about it.
Yeah.
I even want to know what pieta means. Does pieta mean stone, like Peter?
It does. That's
I
right.
don't know.
That's right. Okay.
Does it, is it rock?
He is. I believe it refers to the rock that he's on. Yeah. hmm that the man is on. Right. All right. Let's go to another one. Here's another one you've seen it, and Jenny, you make a great point. I wish I had more time with it. This is, I don't know, maybe the most famous painting of all time, the Mona Lisa. I'm just going to open it up for you. What do you observe? What do you appreciate? And if you had to say something back to this piece, what would you say? I'm going to go, if you don't mind, on this one. I have always been underwhelmed with this piece, but again, art is not my thing, so I'm not a scholar. If any of you have any background in art, man, we could use you tonight. But I've always been underwhelmed. I've always thought she was drab and uninteresting. Um, and and I almost want to say back to this painting, what makes you so special? And boy, I don't like that in me that is my response. But just being really honest, I want to say, what makes you so special?
Joel, if I can make a comment about your comment.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly my feelings about this week's poem.
Ah.
I mean, I've read it before. I think everything that we're reading, I've read before in some, poetry appreciation class or something.
Yep.
And it was put into the canon. And so for the last 100 years or so, somebody put together a collection of poems that said this is a good representation or it's an example of excellence.
It's really great. It's really great, right? Mm-hmm.
And some of them are very moving to me as a novice, and some are just like, yeah, that's why poetry gets the name in it. That's why people think poetry's not for them sometimes.
Right.
And so that's what you're saying about the Mona Lisa. It is exactly the way I feel about some poetry sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think the Keats poem is it actually takes some work to even know why it shows up, why it's still around. And that's how I feel about this Mona Lisa. How did you
Yeah.
get how do you get to be? It's a washed out yellowish piece of a ho hum
Yeah.
looking girl. You know? Yeah. Hmm. Okay. Jenna, any comments about the Mona Lisa?
I saw her in person
Mm,
at, at the Louvre,
yeah.
and she was roped off. No one could get close, and
And
it never looked good to me.
yeah, so even in person, it did not resonate with you as being spectacular or anything.
Except it was the one piece that was enshrined in a red velvet rope,
Uh-huh.
and people standing around looking at
Right.
it.
Yeah. Let's try another one. Uh, this one is in maybe a little more interesting. Vincent Van Gogh's The Starry Night. Who's got an observation or an appreciation of this?
See, I really do like uh, Van Gogh's work. I like this one especially because of the movement
Yeah.
and because it's an interpretation. It's not a duplication. He's not saying this is what the sky looks like. He's saying this is what the sky makes me feel,
Uh-huh.
and,
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
I really like it uh, for that reason.
Yeah. Good. I too, James. I don't know that you and I are art experts, but so far, I think our opinions, our taste, that's probably about the best I have. I probably don't have a greatly informed opinion, but at least I've got a sense of taste, and this kind of meets my taste. I like the brightness of the stars, is what I take them to be, and I like the strange oceanic movement of the clouds or whatever it is. So I like it. Um, Jenna, thoughts on this? And again, Mike, I've got my eye on the chat, so if you want to write anything in the chat, you feel free, but no pressure to. Jenna, observations. What do you appreciate? And I'd like you to answer the question. What would you like to say back to this piece of art?
It doesn't do anything for me.
Aha, aha. Okay.
I
So,
think I could probably do that too.
I like it. Good. Uh-huh. So, what do you want to say to it?
I can't remember, except Vincent van Gogh is very famous.
Right.
Does he always do impressionistic work
Yeah, he's
like this?
the way I understand it is he is kind of the one of the great fathers of Impressionism, along with Monet and Manet. So yeah, and Manet's so which he used on this painting. So right, yes, always impressionistic, never literal like Da Vinci's um, uh, was quite literal. Always, to make some impression rather than to tell a story. It's kind of interesting. I'm thinking about poetry right now. When I think about James sung a song last time, and that song was extremely um, it had a lot of formal concerns about it, like the Starry Night is. Whereas some of the poetry I was writing or revising, not doing the rhyme, not in doing the rhythm, not doing in lines that made a lot of sense, almost was a little bit more spoken, less rhythmic. I don't know. I think there's some connection to some of the things we're seeing. Here's another one. So this is uh, Gweneka by Pablo Picasso. Sorry, Guernica. Um, Any responses to this one? Speak to the poem here. Speak to it. Tell it what you're responding to.
It seems like a war and death or disease, or everyone seems very unhappy and uncomfortable.
Yes. Oh, I think an art teacher would have to have appreciated what you just said. I think you nailed it, James. James, any responses here?
I get it. Yeah, I feel it. Um, it's just a chaotic mess, and it's a very personalized way of talking about something that you saw. I really like it.
Yeah. Look at the
It's like a dream to me. It's like a nightmare.
yes. It's very motioning. It's lots of motion, lots of action. It's not like I'm looking at a still thing that
Hmm.
doesn't move or change. It feels like it's moving and changing in front of me. If I were saying something to this piece, I would say, "Get me out of here," or something. I don't want to be here. I don't want to see the pain. Look at the woman on the left underneath the cow thing. Appears that her clothes are falling off, and she's got a dead loved one in her arms. It's pain. Yeah. Remember how last time I read Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Rime of the Ancient Mariner to you for like 30 minutes? I'm not going to force you to look at this thing for 30 minutes. um, yeah. This one's called
Well,
Night.
Joel, the last thing I'll say, I wanted to say is, um, I think if 20 different people did Mona Lisa,
Uh,
we would all, you know, they would all look kind of, I don't want to say the same, but you could all tell it was a human female,
yeah,
and nobody else could have done this.
yeah, yeah,
You know, this is a very personalized piece. Nobody else is going to do something that Picasso did.
yeah. Right on. This one's called Nighthawks. Edward Hopper. Observations, things you appreciate, and what would you say back to it? (1947) in America. I kind of like the silence. Um, there's nothing going out on the street, and inside just a little bit going on, and that's behind glass. It's almost like the silence is the best response. Hmm. Interesting. Well, I'm no artist or art critic. I know very little about art. Um, but I do know that art can inspire. Um, one last one. Every day, the first 5,000 days, by a person named Beeple. Um, what do we know about this piece of artwork? Anybody recognize this? So,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
I I have not seen it before.
Go ahead and write write down the name of this piece of artwork. Every day's the first 5,000 days. And I'll welcome you to Google that and look at it. Try to look at it more closely later. This is a piece of artwork that has been under construction for, I think, about 15 years. It was just finished last week and then sold. And this is significant because it is the first piece of digital artwork that has ever been put up for auction. Just let that sink in for a second here. This is not all of the other ones we've looked at have been pieces of art that are painted, created, they're actual living, not living, but they're actual items in the world that you could hold in your hand, put on the wall. This has never been put on the wall. It was created as a digital piece of artwork that indeed every one of these tiny little squares itself is a piece of artwork. So this guy who calls himself Beeple has been working for 15 years on this thing. And to look at it on your screen, you can't appreciate any of it. Part of the point of it is it can be expanded exponentially so that every one of those little squares you could look at individually. And I guess there are 5,000 pictures in front of your face, and each of those have a meaning or a piece. And I've seen some of them and looked at them closely, and they're all just it's like 5,000 pieces of digital art all in one form, but it's not been printed. I mean, somebody's certainly probably printed. You could print your screen right now and print it, but the point is, it's not native to a physical object. It is a digital object, and it went up for auction. And so Beeple sold his work of art that he's been working on for 15 years. He sold it last Tuesday, and he sold it. How much would a piece of digital art sell for? The answer is it sold for $69 million. Guy from Australia purchased this piece of artwork, digital artwork, that is on the internet that any of us can access, for $69 million. And I think the entire world has gasped and said, huh? I got it off the internet today. How can the guy spend for free? How can the guy spend $69 million for what? The rights, or saying he did it, or whatever? The guy who bought it is the founder of a cryptocurrency group. So he is sort of into digital culture anyway. But I don't know. If I had to say something back to this piece of artwork, I think I would say, what did you do to our sense of value? You have crushed the concept of commerce. This sells for $69 million, and it's just a two-dimensional set of digital ones and zeros. How can this have value? Confounding. But I think possibly if you go back and look at the works of art we've looked at, they've all probably tried to confound our senses of reality in some way.
Yeah, to me, it makes as much sense as, I don't remember the artist. I'm gonna act like an idiot and say I think his name is Rothko, but there are a lot of artists that were kind of in the postmodern era, and they would put like a complete white panel up,
Yeah.
or a red panel, and it's famous and it's worth millions of dollars, and or a toilet seat, or
Yeah.
or and the art world has accepted the challenge of is this value? Yes, this is value because I'm the first one to say, a blank canvas is art.
Yeah.
And so you can't be the second. You can't be the second person to do that, but you can be the first.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So one last piece of artwork to take a glance at is this. Now, it's not actually the Grecian urn, but it is a drawing of what the Grecian urn that John Keats must have been looking at, because it has pieces of the story that he's done. So what we've done here together is observe, appreciate, and talk back to a piece of art. Um, and that's what Ode on a Grecian Urn is all about. It's basically, to whatever extent we started our own poetry speaking to those other pieces of art. And we didn't really, we just got the starting of it. We just barely started by observing and appreciating, and then starting to speak our feelings back to it. That's really what Ode to a Grecian Urn is. And I am going to read it to you, 5 stanzas, not too long, and just kind of get a sense of what Keats says. Now, James did a really already highlighted the most important question for this poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn, and that is, why am I supposed to care? Why am I supposed to like this? What am I supposed to do? And we'll get to that. There is a so what in there. I'm not positive that it will satisfy James as being really all that worthwhile. But there is something that happens in the poem that is probably worth talking about, and probably, quite frankly, probably why it's been canonized as really worthwhile and something that we all need to listen to. This is from the Romantic period, which is somewhere in the mid 1800s. Ode on a Grecian Urn. Romantic period in England really was a return to, I guess, praising and rejoicing classical things. It's when Queen Victoria was around, and they had the hair and makeup and wigs and fanciness, all the fanciness for fanciness' sake, and that kind of thing. And um, in that context of a return to all things classic, the European mind really did kind of praise um, the sublime for whatever that's worth. Um, a sort of reverence to what's classical. And so in looking at this urn, which by the way, we obviously we don't have a picture of it. I'm not sure that there was ever a drawing of it. The best we have are sketches of what it must have looked like when he was looking at this piece of art, this pot, so to speak, this urn, and praising it and talking back to it. So what we're going to see in his poem is John Keats observing, appreciating, and speaking back to this piece of art. And here's what he does in 1819. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, Sylvian historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme? What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape, of deities or mortals, or of both? In Tempe or in the dales of Arcady, what men or gods are these? What maiden's sloth? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? You can hear John Keats looking at this the pictures and the story told on the surface of the urn and observing it, talking to it, and trying to lure its meaning out. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes, play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared. Pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss. Though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve, she cannot fade. Though thou hast not thy bliss, forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. He's speaking to these images and the two lovers sitting side by side on there. You can't kiss, you can't do anything because you're stuck in time. But boy, if you only had a moment, you'd be able to do that. There's no music playing out of these pipes and flutes that he sees, right? But how sweet is that silence because it allows me to imagine what was going on there. When I talked about the Romantic period being reverent to that which was sublime or traditional, he's looking into it and just appreciating and longing to be a part of this story that's told on this silent urn. He goes on, ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor even bid the spring adieu, and happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever painting, forever young, all breathing human passions far above, that thy leaves a heart high full sour, sorry, that leaves a heart high sorrowful encloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Sorry about the fumble lips there. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest? Leadest thou that heifer lowing in the skies, and all her silken flanks with the gardens dressed? What little town by river or seashore, or mountain built with peaceful citadel, is emptied of this folk, this pious mom? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate. Can e'er return. I've said a number of times here that I'm not a student of art, but John Keats clearly is. He's got that yearning to understand and speak back to this silent urn that has a story for him. And he finishes, O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches from the trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth. Truth, beauty. That's all you know on earth and all you need to know. It's as if Keats is looking at this piece of art, and by the way, it could be any art. It could be the Sistine Chapel painting. It could be a Van Gogh. It could be Biddle's work, the first 5,000 days. It could be anything that he's looking for some kind of message. And James, to your question, how is it that this ode is one that is canonized and always assigned and always talked about? And I think it rests in these last two lines, this last couplet.
Mm-hmm.
Thou shalt remain in the midst of what he's talking to the urn. when old age shall this generation waste, when we're all old and gone, thou shalt remain in the midst of other woe than ours, right? You'll be around here and other people will be looking at you. A friend to man you are, to whom you say, beauty is truth. Truth. That's all you need to know on earth. That's all you know on earth and all you need to know. Those two lines, that's kind of those two lines are the ode to poetry, the ode to art, the ode to music. Any of us who are inspired and impassioned with an art form probably get those last two lines.
Hmm.
Beauty is truth, truth beauty. So if you're listening to your favorite song or your favorite piece of art or your favorite poet, whatever your sense of taste is, and you're enjoying it, and it's a piece of sublime love, and someone asks you, why is it so good? When I'm looking at the Mona Lisa, where millions of people over time have gotten something great out of it, and maybe I haven't, but somebody has. They look at that and they might not we might not be able to articulate what it is that moves us from any particular piece of art, but we can say this: when it hits us, there's something
Hmm.
about the beauty and truth that work together, that truth beauty. And that's all you really know, or maybe all you need to know. Hmm. Yeah. It's a simple message.
I'm glad I'm glad you have a picture of that urn
Huh.
because when I read the poem, in my mind I saw a blank shape of an urn, and I didn't know there was a picture on it. I
Yeah.
didn't know why it said ode on a Grecian urn. That puzzled me.
Yeah.
Why not ode about a Grecian? I didn't realize he was describing something on the urn,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Right. You know, those three things that we did, observe, appreciate, and speak back to, is really what he's doing here. It's almost as if John Keats said, "I'll go ahead and go on the urn. Can I do the urn, please?" And so he kind of observes what he sees, appreciates the both appreciates and longs for it, for the silence, but and the movement. Remember how we were looking at the movement of the sky in Starry Night, and just going, "Wow, speak to me. I see more." That's exactly what he's doing here. Observing, appreciating exactly the story that's being told, and then gets down to one of the great observations of poetry of all time, which is beauty is truth. Truth. Let me just ask you, have you ever seen something and you just know it's right, or heard something and just know, oh, that it's true? You know, that impact, that whether it's a perfect turning of a phrase, or maybe listening to a sermon, and a good talented preacher says something and you go, ah, yes, that's right, because of how well it was articulated, and it hits you as truthful in your heart or soul. That's what John Keats is doing here. Look, I don't get anything out of the urn. I'm not a big urn fan, but I certainly am a fan of how he observes, appreciates, and speaks back to this thing, and ultimately gives me something that I can chew on, forever, which is beauty is truth, truth, beauty. It's all you know on earth and all you need to know.
I liked it that it was an urn and not a painting that he was talking about. I mean, it could have easily. I mean, from one point of view, he could have very easily been, owed on a painting
Yeah. Yeah.
of a farm or something.
Right. Right.
But the fact that it was an urn to me meant it was three-dimensional, and like a human in front of you instead of on a painting, you have to see it from all angles to get it,
Yes.
to get the whole thing. And so you can't look at a vase or some sort of three-dimensional object like this urn and get it without walking around it.
Yeah.
With and it made me think he's not talking about an urn at all.
Mm.
He's talking about walking a mile in someone else's shoes, or fully understanding the context of someone else's action or whatever. And so for me, there was a lot of truth in the fact that he was really thinking about the details of this urn, and kind of like the flea, we're not talking about an urn here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah.
Now, it turns out we are just talking about an urn, perhaps, but that's not what I got out of it.
Yeah. That's good. That's really powerful. What you said is, hey, this is a metaphor, right? Sure ain't a simile, because he didn't allude to any like or as. It's this metaphor of appreciating something is like appreciating a life. And I like where you took that. Really nice. Well, I'll tell you, let's leave it there. I do have just a little bit of homework for you if you choose to participate. And this time, I'm really am going to ask you to do it. You don't have to, no judgment. I'll be thrilled to see you next week if you don't. But you remember how last time we started our conversation with, hey, what's your story? What's a story about your life that really stands out? My story was walking through the desert, getting lost, and then being found. What I'm going to ask you is, send me an email this week, jenglish@centura.edu, jenglish@centura.edu, and just remind me that story. Yeah, no poetry. I'm not asking you to write a poem about it, but just hit me with the telling of that story, whether it's a couple paragraphs or, just whatever it takes to briefly tell me the heart of that story. And what I'll probably do is ask us to talk about those stories just a little bit next time. We'll have 2 segments left next week and the week following. So please do a story that was important in your life that kind of was in some way unique to you, a story that stands out as, I remember that time. That's different. Tell me that story. Just write it to me in an email. And then the road not taken.
Not necessarily the same one we did last week.
If you have a different one, I absolutely welcome you to give me a different one. But if it is, I'm totally fine if it is the same one. But if another one that you'd like to spend a little more time with comes to mind, happy to have that one as well. So I'm basically asking you to tell me a story. Yes, sir, Mike. Put it upwards a little bit. Backwards just a little bit, back toward you. Short story, right. And pull it way back, Mike, so I can see the whole thing. A short story, beauty is truth, and lift up some by Anna Guest. Great. Beauty is. Oh, thank you. So the short story, Beauty is Truth by Anna Guest is great. Wonderful. Excellent. I'll look into that too, Mike, and love to talk about it. Thank you. Appreciate that. And obviously, I have not read that, but Beauty is Truth, certainly that phrase came from Keats, because really that repeats a lot. Okay, so our number one project, send me an email telling me about a little vignette from your life, a story that's kind of important. And then we're going to read The Road Not Taken. At the very beginning of tonight's session, I told you that next week, I'm going to give you a different take on this poem. Everybody knows The Road Not Taken. Everybody knows Two Paths Diverged in a Woods. We all know it, and I'm going to guide you to read it differently than you've probably ever been welcomed to read it before. And I look forward to that very much. Okay, so send me an email this week. Tell me a little story, and I look forward to seeing you. Thanks again for your fifth Tuesday spent talking about poetry, and I hope you'll make it a sixth and the seventh. And hope you have a great rest of the week.